Hi, I'm your host, Reena Suri, and welcome to Thriving Changes, a place where we share stories from brave and courageous people who have navigated challenges, crisis, or a change in their personal or professional life and gave it a new meaning. It's a platform where leaders open up about their fears, vulnerabilities, and the journey that led them to triumph. Our hope is to inspire and motivate others to take their first step towards thriving changes. Chicago native Rachael Stewart is a licensed clinical social worker and the founder and clinical director of Amaris Counseling. Rachel's passion is to guide each person and community as they navigate life transitions, career changes, heal from trauma, and repair relationships so that they walk in complete healing and wholeness while living authentically. In this podcast, Rachel shares her own life journey, how she dealt with losing her mom at a young age of 9, and then later the loss of a relationship when she and her ex husband went through a divorce. Her resilience was evident throughout this conversation. I walked away influenced by her positive mindset, her joyful presence, and her desire to seek peace within her and in all her relationships. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to Thriving Changes.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course, it's my pleasure. I am so excited for this conversation. I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a long time. For some reason or the other, it kept getting rescheduled. Either my schedule was off or yours, and but I'm so glad we finally made it. So thank you for your time and taking out a Friday evening to do this. I know Friday evenings are precious. So grateful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background, what you do, and how you got to doing that.
Sure. So I am a licensed clinical social worker and I have a virtual private practice and it's a group practice and it was birthed out of the pandemic. I have been a therapist for a long time now, about 10 years, but during the pandemic I really just started on Facebook doing check-ins with people and just offering like, hey, free 30-minute check-ins. The world is crazy. Like, you need some support. And then from there people were like, hey, are you seeing clients? And I was like, I guess I could be. I prayed about it and I felt like God was leading me to do that. And so, yeah, I thought it was just going to be me and my 4 little clients that I had. And it really just grew. At our largest, we've had about 11 clinicians. Right now, I think we have about a solid 4 or 5, including myself. And we've had clinical interns. We're a faith-based practice. So for those who identify as Christian, we offer those type of services, but we serve everybody. But that's just where all of the therapists, that's their faith system.
Yeah, for our viewers, help us understand the difference between Christian counseling and faith based counseling.
Sure. We all identify as Christians, so we would be considered Christian counseling. So whenever we include someone's faith in it, we come from the Bible, and that's our standpoint. However, because we are clinicians who serve all populations, maybe someone might not identify as Christian, and so we would still serve them. We just might not include the religious aspect because that's just not where our framework comes from. Christian counseling usually was done by pastors or clergy or things like that, but now there has been an overlap for mental health professionals who also identify as Christian, so they fall into that Christian counseling as well. Faith-based really can be any faith. So if you are Buddhist, if you're a Muslim, then they all also practice from a faith-based framework, but ours is just for those who identify as Christians.
All right. So primarily, if you would involve faith, it would be Christian.
It would be just like if someone came to me, and I usually only work with adults. So if they wanted me to see a 3-year-old, I would refer out because that's not my specialty. So same way there, if someone is looking for something specific to their faith and it doesn't align with mine, I would just refer out because I would want to make sure that they had someone who was knowledgeable and had the experience.
So just a little more clarification on it. So what I'm understanding is that it is the scientific based counseling.
Mm-hmm.
It just involves a faith, a spiritual aspect to it.
Absolutely. It just leaves opening for it because most people, if their faith is important to them, it's part of everyday life, right? So when I think about mental health, I think about the people as a whole system. So I can't just say, how's your marriage, how's your kids, and then leave out your faith if that's something that you walk out every day, right? So it's pretty much like we would just talk about it and we might involve scripture. There might be just open dialogue around it. Sometimes I have clients who are Christians and it never comes up at all. And then I also have clients who don't identify as Christian, and that's never a problem either. It's just an option for those who say, hey, this is such a big part of my life. I don't want to leave it out of the therapeutic process.
Got it. All right. How did you end up doing it? How did you realize this is something that you want to do?
Yeah, I think for most people who are in the counseling profession, it's not just a career, it's a calling. So I have always been the friend that people came and talked to from when I was young. I just always had, I guess, wisdom and was able to give wise counsel. I thought I was going to school to be a journalist. I went to Mizzou my first year of college, and it's like the number one journalism school in Illinois, in the United States. Actually, it's in Missouri. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go. And then I took a social work class as part of my gen eds. And I was like, wait, there might be something here. Then I just started taking psychology classes and doing all, and then, yeah, it's the path just blossomed and opened up for me. I didn't necessarily think I was going to do this. My undergraduate internship was in domestic violence. So I thought for sure, okay, I'm going to be a domestic violence advocate. This is what I want to do, I think. And then my graduate internship, I worked at a community mental health agency, and it changed my life. I had one of the best supervisors of my life who really just spoke life into me and said, one day you'll be a clinical supervisor. And then he just really helped me to not be afraid of working with individuals who had severe and persistent mental illness, who had really severe depression, or who had psychosis or different things like that. And so it just really opened my mind, and I found a new compassion and just fire for that. Since then, it was just, the ball was rolling.
Great. It's so nice. I think it plays such an important role to just take different classes and see what makes you thrive. What is it that lights the fire in you? And to recognize that.
Absolutely.
Colleen, I know that you're a mental health therapist, but
Mhm.
you've had your own journey where you've navigated quite a few challenges in your own personal life. We'd start with losing your mom at a very young age.
Mhm.
Could you help us understand what happened and how old were you and how did it impact you?
So I was 9 when my mom passed. It was definitely sudden, wasn't expected. I came home from school one day and I was the one who found her. And my younger brother was there. He's 8 years younger than me. He was there with her. We live in a multi unit building. And so we had family there. And I was able to go down and ask my uncle to open the door for me and everything. So it was a very traumatic day for sure. She had heart complications, like with blood pressure and stuff like that. That's why I'm such an advocate for health, because health comes at all sizes. She was a size 0 her entire life, but then doesn't always necessarily equate healthy, right? She had issues with her heart. She had me when she was 35. She had my brother when she was 42. And I think it has shaped who I am as a person, not just the resilience with which I meet the world, but I think also the optimism as well. I am definitely one of those people who are like, because I was faced with death at such a young age, it's like you have to live and you have to be present in the moment. It shapes the type of mother that I became to my children, of just being able to say my mom had so much life and energy, and I wanted to do the same. I wanted to create experiences. And so it absolutely impacted how I engage with the world, and especially like mothering without a mother is one of the most unique experiences I think anybody can ever have. And it hits you in so many different ways, and grief comes in so many different ways. You know, you think that you've grieved, and then you have a child, or then you have another milestone that happens, and then you realize this would be a great time to have a mom. And I've been blessed with many mother figures, and I have an adoptive mother who's amazing. There's nothing like your biological mother, and just knowing what would our relationship be like now, especially now as I have a teenage daughter and I'm living out an experience that I tell her all the time, like, I don't have a framework for this. I don't know what this looks like in this sense. And so we're figuring it out together.
Wow, so many questions. So, first of all, at that stage, today you can reflect back and look at it differently as an adult. But take me back to that 9-year-old. What did she feel when it just all happened? I'm assuming Since you've not mentioning your dad, was he present?
Yeah,
Not.
so my dad he came home. He was at work at the time. It was the 90s, so we paged him. He had a pager, so paged him and got him home and everything. My parents were together since they were 14, so they have been together 30 years by then. So it was devastating for him. So he came, he took my brother and I to one of his sister's house. He went to the hospital, he was waiting. And I think even then, it was just like a kind of business like, not business like, but it was all right. I still had to do homework. I was working on math homework, and then when I found out, and he called my aunt and solidified, and she told me, it was a very kind of, okay, I'm doing homework, okay, now what? Like, I really didn't know what to do. And my mom, she didn't work, she was home with us all the time, so she was a huge part of my world. She was one who was like always in parent teacher things, and we did Girl Scout, everything that you can think of, that was it. And because I was with family members who weren't the warmest, it probably wasn't the traditional like, oh, let me hug and embrace you and everything. Like, she told me she might have hugged me. I honestly can't even remember. I just remember she told me, and then I was like, okay, that's it. And I think that is where this resilience came from. And it was just like, bad stuff happens and you just got to keep going. I remember when we went with my dad to go to my mom's side of the family, because she has many sisters and a big family. And we went to go, and I remember in the car, he was telling me, okay, don't go in there crying and being all upset. In hindsight, I'm like, I was 9 and I had just lost my mother. Of course I should be upset. And so I go in and everybody's like, Rachel, how are you doing? And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm fine. Then one of my cousins, who was my mother's best friend, she was like, you're not fine. And I think I cried. So I tell people all the time, I grieved, but I really didn't take the time to intentionally grieve, probably till I was in my early 20s. So a lot of it, I just kind of got back to business because my dad was not a very emotional person. There just wasn't a lot of room for it. I had this younger brother that I felt responsible for and just to be there for. And then I had a stepmother who entered the picture very soon after. And so there just really wasn't room for my grief, I think.
Got it. So when did it actually hit you, the grief? You said in your early 20s. So.
Yeah, so I got married the first time when I was 21. And I think planning that, I was very close to my former mother in law. And so it was that. But I think planning a wedding without your mom, having a baby soon after, and not really having that support that you would want. Of course, you have support from family, but everything just looks so different then. And so I think that's when I really started to have the grief of, I'm starting this adult life. But I think it was there always, like in grammar school and even in high school, when you see people hanging out with their moms, I'm just kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I don't have that experience. I was living with my adoptive family by then, but I still, it wasn't the same closeness that you get from a biological mother. And so I think there always was this kind of longing that I would see my girlfriends and their moms and wishing I could do some of those things. That's something that was always just in the background, but it didn't really come to the front until I got married and I started having children.
How did that grief show up in your life? What were some of the symptoms?
Yeah, I think just definitely sadness. A lot of, I think I was angry sometimes, of just like, why is this my life? Why did this happen to me? Why did it have to be my mom? It's not that I ever wanted to wish it was my dad instead, but we were so close when we were younger. But as you're growing older, you want a mother. It was hard to relate to him in a lot of ways. And so I think it was just this why me that came up. Like, why did this have to be my journey? Just feeling like things were unfair. I'm sure there was some depression that was in there, especially after I had my daughter, and just having some postpartum depression, like sadness and regret, wishing that I maybe could have done more, asked her more. But at 9, you don't ask deep questions, right? You don't really think to. But I think it was just a lot of that. Oh man, I didn't really get to know her how I would have wanted to.
So, how did you cope with it? Uh,
Talking to my family. So my mother's family was very helpful. They always were willing to share stories. If ever I would come up, it's not, her birthday was never really a big thing, or even the day that she passed. But Mother's Day is always really hard for me, just because it's in the same month that she passed, May 17th. And often Mother's Day is that Sunday right before. So usually Mother's Day is where it hits me the most. So every time Mother's Day would come around, usually I would ask my family, hey, send me some memories. What are some things? And that was really helpful. And then my faith was a huge part of that, of just being able to know, okay, I'll get to see her again. I know that there's comfort, and just receiving a lot of support from my faith community as well.
and not long after this, when you were grieving, I think you went through another challenge, which was in your personal life, again, was a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And that was also pretty early in your life. Help us understand what happened there. What was your experience about it?
Yeah, I think being young and thinking what you want out of life, that's why it's always so interesting to me when I work with clients and they're like 23 and they're like, I just want to do, and I'm like, not that some people don't have it figured out at 23. Before 25, that prefrontal cortex is not even developed yet. So our judgment is just off. So I think I married someone who we were really good friends, and I really loved the idea of marriage. And we both were young and he wanted to get married. He wanted to be serious. And so I was like, oh, I'm not going to find anybody else who wants to do this. So I got married with good intentions. I just wasn't ready. I wasn't mature. I didn't know who I was as a woman. I didn't know who I was even in my faith walk. I was very new to it. And I think I know who I am, but I really didn't know how to have God at the center of everything. And so I came into it with some people pleasing personalities, and there was just a lot. And I think that it was a friendship that should have stayed a really good friendship, but probably wasn't meant to be a lifelong marriage. We also got pregnant right before we got married. And so that was a big motivating factor of, especially being a Christian, it was, well, now we're supposed to get married. And it's like, this is the way we quote unquote fix this. And I really didn't, at that age, I didn't think there were other options, to be quite honest. I was like, this is the path that we have to take. And I loved him, of course. And so we just went in. I think there were just so many factors where it wasn't really set up for a lot of success. And so doing that, being so young, maybe not having wise counsel, I can't say that I really talked to people about it. This is who I've been with for the past 3-4 years. This is what it's going to be. But it wasn't me actually talking to people and saying, could life look different? And I think, again, that's where a mother would have came in and really sat me down and said, are you sure about this? Is this what you want? And I think people tried, but back then I also was I'm a very determined person when I want to be. So sometimes when my mind is made up, my mind is made up. So I think it was just a perfect storm of events. But I think that it really was, and then what led to the downfall was some of those same things of just immaturity and not really being ready to know what commitment was and what communication looked like. When you don't know who you are going into something, and then you start learning, you evolve, you realize these two things don't go together, right? Who you are might have meshed with who I was when I was 17, 18, but at now, by the time I was 23 and we were looking at separation, I was a different person. And I was like, I had stopped being who I wanted to be for the sake of the relationship. And it was a place where I just didn't want to be anymore. I had to be true to myself. And that clashed with who I was with. But absolutely, you don't go into marriage thinking it's going to end in divorce, right? Especially when you have a child together. So we tried to make it work, and I really tried to grasp everything and say, okay, we can do this. But I think it was too late. But we have an awesome co-parenting relationship. We both are happily remarried, and I wish him and his family nothing but the best. And I'm just happy that we co-parent well for our daughter, because that's what's most important.
That's great. I think that it's nice to reach that. I know when two people separate, there can be a lot of anger, bitterness, resentment.
Mhm.
It's part of it. But once we get through that storm, I think if couples can find that space to co parent lovingly, it's a great place to be, especially for the child, because the child deserves both the parents and to know both the parents and
Mhm.
be connected with them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've
So,
always had that mindset. I'm like, the happier you are, the happier my daughter is. So I wouldn't want your house to be chaos, because I'm like, then she'll be miserable. And I think because I grew up in such a tumultuous household, I was like, I would never want that for my children. That's the mindset. I know it's hard, and it was hard. Not to say we were perfect from the beginning, because we went through phases where we could only talk to each other through email. So it definitely is a learning part. But at this point now, we have been co-parenting longer than we ever parented together. So this is a dynamic that, just with the grace of God and patience and maturity, that we've learned, and with time too. We've been divorced now almost 10 years. We have the gift of time too, where we've had time to just grow up and to get better.
yeah. Divorce is also a loss,
Absolutely.
right? You go through grief even at that time.
Yeah.
So the second time grieving, how did you cope with it? How did it show up?
Yeah. I was devastated, honestly, because I thought I failed. I didn't imagine my life any other way. And now I was faced with this new life, these new realities. I had to give up a lot in the beginning because of just even our financial situations and everything. I gave up a lot of time with my daughter because I had to work more. I wasn't able to be the primary parent like I wanted to be. And I got a lot of flack from people because of that. But I was like, this is what works, and unless you're gonna come in here and pay my bills, I have to do these things. I have these new responsibilities that I didn't have to take on before. And so along with that, I was grieving. So I was not only grieving the loss of this relationship that I thought was going to last forever, also the loss of not seeing my daughter every day. We were co-parenting, so we were splitting our time maybe 3-4 days, but it's different when you go from up until I got my master's degree, I was a stay-at-home mom, so I was in school and I was working, so I went from all this time with my daughter to now I only see my daughter 3 days a week, 4 days a week, or something like that. So that was the biggest loss. I can just even remember still, like, one of those first times when we did pick up and drop off and watching them drive away and just going to my bed and like bawling, because that was like where I think it really hit me of this is our new normal and this is our new reality of now I'm just alone, and I'm alone in this season. And I had people and friends and stuff like that, but it was the first time where I was like, it's just me and I have to figure this out, and I have to figure out how do I do this in a healthy manner where I grieve, but I still have to be a mom and I still have to work and I still have to do all these things. It was a lot. I leaned into working out a lot. Like, I remember I had started a little bit before we separated and got divorced, but that was something that I used, just like working out, working. Eventually, I wound up socializing and going out with friends, but a lot of it was just doing that internal work and trying to figure out, what do I do now? Because the life that I thought I had before me doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. So when you say internal work, what did that involve?
Yeah, I think reconciling just the thought of failure and mistakes with God and being able to say, my life still has a purpose, even if I'm not his wife. My life still has a purpose, even if our marriage is not. Trying to ask God what my purpose then was. And again, where do I go from now? Because we even lived in a different state. So now it's okay, I'm coming back to my home states, neighboring states, Illinois and Indiana, but I'm coming back to Illinois. Again, what do I do now? What does it look like? And just trying to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be, because a lot of my identity was wrapped up in that first marriage. And so I had to now figure out, okay, now without anybody else's input, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want myself and my daughter's life to look like? And so I think that was a lot of that internal work. And then just healing, because I knew I wanted to get remarried again eventually. And so it was just, okay, what do I need to learn from this? What are the missteps I made? What are the missteps that he made? What are red flags that we both could have looked out for? And how do I translate that to future relationships? And how do I make sure that I show up the best version of myself whenever I decide to be with someone again?
So did you take any support at that time?
Yes. So I did go through counseling, and that was very helpful, and it really helped the grief process. And I think that's where I started even dealing with some of the grief from my mom. And that's when I realized, because this was right around that early 20s phase, when I was like, oh, hadn't really grieved some of that. So I think that's coupled together. I just took time to grieve. And that's where some of that intentional grieving came of, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to realize that divorce is like a death, and that you can sit in it and you can really take time, because otherwise it's going to be very sneaky and it's going to come up. So counseling was very helpful. I was in a prayer group during that time. And so myself and some friends and family, we were praying together every day. We hung out a lot. And so that community really pulled me through. I probably wouldn't have survived without that group. I would have survived, but you know what I mean? They helped pull me through, and they gave me a lot of hope and encouragement and accountability. So paramount to everything that I was going through.
Yeah, that support makes such a huge difference. To have those people around you who will, just let you be a part of. They know what you're going through, but at the same time, give you that gentle nudge and support you in taking your next steps. And just being around if you need somebody to take care of your daughter for a day, for an evening, or for a day. Those people come in, they chip in. Suddenly, it makes so much of a difference. You were doing life alone at that time. For obviously in marriages, we split our responsibilities. Somebody is doing the finances or the budgeting or whatever. So now everything is on you.
Mm-hmm.
And so did you had to learn some new skills? get to know your finances.
Yes, absolutely. I was terrible with money. So I had to, because that was his arena. And then, especially because I wasn't working. So when we were married, it was just like, oh, there's money in the account. And I don't think I really even had the concept sometimes of how to budget. And this is where it came from. And this is what we do. Because again, I was so young. I went from being in college to then being a wife. And there wasn't a lot of conversation. And in college, my dad just sent me money. And I could work a job, but I also could not work a job and be fine. And my dad would send me money, or I would get a refund check from school. And so I didn't have this concept of this is what we have for the month. And I will say, we didn't talk about it either. So I really didn't have that much time where I could have learned. I probably could have asked more. It just didn't happen. To then all of a sudden being able to say, all right, I have to work. I have to figure out all this. And that was literally the weekend that I was starting to move stuff out. My car went out on the highway, like off the side of the highway. So I then had to buy a new car. And then I had to have him co-sign for it because I had just co-signed. We had gotten a new car like the year before or something like that. So then now I'm like, okay, my credit took a hit. I can't get this car on my own. Now I need you to help me co-sign so I can have a car to. So it was just a perfect storm of, oh, now I have a car note that I have to figure out. I have to, all these things. Yeah, definitely learning new skills. But I think also the beauty of it was I also got to learn how to run at home, because there were a lot of expectations and things that he had of this is how I think a home should be run. And I just agreed with, because I was like, okay, you learned this from your mom. That's what sounds good to me. But I really didn't get to learn and lean into my identity. Again, what do I want my house to look like? What do I want my parenting style to be? What do I want? He's an excellent father, but he kind of was a mama bear. So I really didn't get to have that of what do I want? So I think it was hard, but it was necessary too, because again, this is where I learned on the ground training of this is who you want to be. This is the type of mom you want to be. This is the type of just person and woman that you want to be. So it was necessary lessons.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. So, coming back to the financing bit, did you take any classes? Did somebody help you out?
No,
Uh,
not at all. I
is-
just learned by failure and learning. If I went over my budget this month and stuff happened, oh, that doesn't work. So if I got in danger of my car being repossessed, it's like, oh, you probably need to do something. So it was just like trial and error learning. Eventually, many years later, I think I wind up learning, looking at Instagram and following financial things and learning and trying to do savings account. Obviously, as you grow and you learn and mature, your friends start talking about things like that. So you start to think that way. But in the beginning, a lot of it was just trial and error. And some of that came from childhood too, where I was raised in a home where money wasn't, I didn't see budgets. It was kind of like you want it, you get it, and that's where that unhealthy mindset surrounding money started too, because my dad worked a great job. He was an elevator constructor. He made a lot of money. And so we really didn't have to worry. So it wasn't like this concept of working for it and then budgeting it out and everything. So those, again, necessary skills that I needed to figure out.
so, now how is your relationship with money?
Yeah, I think I'm a business owner. So my relation, I think there's some anxiety that comes in that. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm self-employed. So my income looks different every month. So I think it's interesting, but I think it's much more stable, where I'm the person who does the budget in our family, actually. So I'm usually the one who's like, hey, I'll write it. Actually, I gave it to my husband because I said, hey, you can learn and you can do it. And I'm going to take a step back because I'm tired. But I usually am the person who thinks, hey, I always know what's going on and how we should plan and what are some things. And if we want to take a trip, we should do. I think it's a good relationship now. I think it could always be better because I went through a period of having bad spending habits. I was into perfumes for a while and those can be expensive, but I think that it's definitely 10 years later, much, much better.
Yeah. Resuming dating again. What was the mindset at that time? And then how did you meet? I'm assuming you're in a relationship now, you're married again. So, how did that happen?
So by the time I was ready to get into the dating world and by the time our divorce was final, I was, I think, 25 at the time. And I was just like, let's see what's out there. Let's see what I like, what I don't like, and everything. And again, I hadn't really done much because getting married so young, I hadn't gone on a lot of dates and explored. We just did kid stuff, like go to the movies, go to, so I think I was trying to also learn to date as an adult as well. So I was on dating sites because I'm not one of those people who go out and I'm not going to go to a mixer. Really, every now and again I might go out, but it's hard to meet people organically. And so I was on dating sites, and I had a few relationships, but they would all just fizzle out. Or because I'm a therapist, often I think I would draw people in that were, I won't say need fixing, but they would come in and it was like I would take on people almost as projects and not necessarily as partners. And it wasn't a very healthy dynamic. And so I had to go through a period of who do I want to be? What do I want from a marriage? What does this look like? What does God want from me? And all of that. And so by the time I met my husband, I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. I was very decided, and he just got on board, And so we met on a dating site, and I guess books would call it a whirlwind romance. But to me, it was very like, look, this is what I want. We met in January. We got engaged in September on my birthday, and we got married in November. But in hindsight, we probably could have waited a little bit just because he had never dated anybody with a kid before. My daughter was, I think, 7 by then, or just turning 7. And it was a lot. He really had to grow up when he met me and grow up and learn how to do life. He had relationships, but this was the most serious that he had ever been in. But yeah, it was definitely a lot of intentionality, though. I will say that even with things moving quickly, it moved quickly because we were so intentional. We knew our values lined up. I think on the dating site, they had a percentage of compatibility or something like that. And I want to say we were like 98% or something like that. Our values have always aligned. We have a lot of the same hobbies, and I think we are really good friends, and I think that drives the relationship. So that has always been just the foundation that we had. So even in all the storms of life that we've had, because we had that foundation, we've been able to weather them with the grace of God.
Yeah. That's an important point that you bring up, that values to get aligned and to know, because it's so important for any relationship, I think, especially marriage and, of course, in business, to understand and get connected to those values and see if you're coming from there and to be actually intentional about it. So, did you ever think that you would find love again?
Have you ever seen the show How I Met Your Mother?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a Ted. So for people who watch it, like I am the hopeless romantic. I'm just like, there's love out there. I know it's meant to be. So I think, yes, I never thought that it wouldn't happen. I just didn't know how or who or anything like that. And I think I did get a little frustrated because the relationship I had before I met my husband was so draining. I was with somebody and I ignored a lot of red flags and everything. I was making it work and all that. And then I just was like, no, this is so draining. Can't do this. So I think I had kind of given up hope. And similarly, my husband had been in the same place when we met. He'd gotten tired of something maybe a couple of months before and was just, look, I just want to chill. I just want to have fun. And when I met him, I was in a place where I was like, you know what? I'm going to give up looking for something serious. I'm just going to let some guys take me on dates and have fun. And I wasn't even 30 yet. So I was like, look, I'm just going to experience life and have fun. And if something happens, it happens. And then, of course, we meet. And now here's the rest of my life. All right.
That's funny. How long have you been married now?
Yeah, November makes 6 years.
Okay. And you had children with him as well?
Absolutely. Yep. We have 2 boys. So we have a 4-year-old and we have a 6-month-old.
Oh, I didn't know you were a new mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
You mentioned that there was some diagnosis that has come up now. Your
Yeah.
son.
So with my 4-year-old, we just found out that he was diagnosed with autism and ADHD. It wasn't a surprise though. I think as a social worker, I picked up on cues a while ago. We knew there might be some things when he was maybe even around 2, started seeing things. We had put him in early intervention. He didn't meet criteria back then, but the last 6 to 9 months, probably, we really started seeing more, especially of the impulsivity and hyperactivity. And I was like, oh, something's going on here. He's not just a boy. There's a little bit of extra going on. And we really advocated for him and got the screenings and everything. And we're glad we did because it just helps us know any additional supports that he might need. That's really helpful. We also kind of knew because we're pretty sure, and now he's actually getting testing, but we're pretty sure my husband is on the spectrum as well. I've always thought like he has probably like Asperger's or something like that, just because some of the social interactions don't come as naturally to him. And so I think it was something that we always operated as though, with or without a diagnosis, what tools and what supports does he need and how to do it. And I think just getting the official diagnosis was okay. Still, now what tools and supports and everything. We've been talking about grief a lot, and not a grief in the sense of this is so terrible, but just grief of what your ideas and plans that you think life looks like and everything. I was talking with my therapist the other day, and I was just like, I'm not quite sure why God chose me to have such a spicy family. To have a husband who has potentially on the spectrum and now have a child on the spectrum. And it's just, again, wow, why am I equipped for this? Because it does change our everyday dynamics. Like sometimes we're in activities and things. I can take him to an activity and I have no clue how it's going to go. Is it going to be a meltdown type of day? Is it going to be he's so distracted he can't enjoy the activity type of day? Or is it going to be a great day? So I think some of that, when you don't really know what to expect from day to day, can be a lot, because it's like, why can't I have a normal day? Why can't I have a normal family? And there's no normal. We know that. But I
Yeah.
think that it definitely was its own type of grief that you have to sit with, and you have to take it in pieces. And some days it's great, and then some days it's not so great. And this is a day where I lean on my supports. This is a day when I contact my therapist. This is a day where I talk to my husband and have hard conversations. So I think it's just a matter of reframing it. That's one of my favorite things to do. And then say, well, why not me? It's such a blessing and it's such a pleasure to be the one who has this family, right? Because I think of how much I had to be trusted to help my husband through even just now getting to the point of saying, maybe I do want to get testing, to be able to have a child with extra superpowers, to be able to say, you know what, I'm competent enough to be his mom and to advocate for him and to love him when most people would be annoyed. So I think that's the framework that I have most days. But you have to be real too, that a lot of days it's hard. And I think when you have the balance of both, then that's where the sweetness of life comes in.
That's so profound. I know that you're still working through it, but being a social worker, I guess you have certain understanding about it. What kind of support and tools do children with autism and ADHD need,
Yeah. So it
especially at
definitely
this age?
depends on the challenges that they have, but speech and language can be really good. For us, we realized that his auditory comprehension isn't that great. Just telling him something might be a challenge, but if you use visual cues or something, so we use a lot of like visual schedules and things like that and timers. And so that really helps. And so just knowing some of those modifications to make to your day, occupational therapy, a lot of it is regulation, especially when you think about ADHD, your nervous system is dysregulated. And so like chiropractic care is helpful because it helps to get things into alignment. I know for a long time, because he is a sensory seeker. So when it comes to autism, people often think of like sensory avoidant, not liking like loud noises and things like that. My son is a sensory seeker. So he always wants to crash things or bite things or put things in his mouth and stuff like that. And so that is a part of how he regulates his nervous system, looking for that proprioceptive input, they call it. And we knew from the beginning squeezes and compression things or stuff like that help to regulate him. And so just making those modifications in everyday life, something that's helpful. And then it helps to manage your expectations, right? A lot of things that he does, it's not this like willful disobedience or this malicious intent. It's, I'm trying to regulate myself and I'm 4 and I don't have the words for it. So I think that patience, and then teaching him how to speak up for what he needs, and like giving breaks. I homeschool. And so I know that I can't sit down for an hour with him. Whereas with my daughter at 4, we could sit for an hour and paint together. That's not going to happen. We're going to do something. And then if it's not his preferred activity of choice, we're going to take a break in 10 minutes and we're going to get some wiggles out. We're going to do these things. So I think those type of things and tools, and a lot of it we had already just intuitively been doing, but now we'll just be adding in the additional support of actual therapists and going to some place or maybe having people come in the home.
Yeah. So how do you manage? Like you homeschool and you are a
That's
virtual
everybody's
therapist.
question all the time. Honestly, I don't know. I always tell people, I will say I'm really good with time management. And I think I just made adjustments. So I used to work quite a lot and I used to just try to fit clients in and stuff like that. And then last year when I got pregnant, it wasn't a planned pregnancy. So we were like, oh, how we're doing life right now is probably not going to be sustainable with adding another child into our dynamic. And I stepped back a lot. I learned how to delegate and I leaned into, you can do everything, but that doesn't mean that you should. And so I found an amazing administrative person who I'm training to eventually become my number 2. I started giving a lot of responsibilities to her. I took a long maternity leave and I decreased my workload. I went from working 4 to 5 days a week to now 2.5 days a week, and really just being intentional with my time. We do have a sitter who comes 2 days a week that helps with the younger boy. So I'm able to have that time. So really it's just planning. And I am intuitive planner. I love planning and organization. So it wasn't hard for me to say, okay, this is what our family needs. How do we do this? Again, I think it comes from support. I have amazing support systems. And at my church, this is probably the most people that I've ever met who've homeschooled. And so they give a lot of like experience, advice, and encouragement. And so just having community definitely helps too. But yeah, again, it's hard, especially in light of that. We just started homeschooling this year, but I think that even us leaning into that was divine providence, because we didn't know that this diagnosis was going to happen, and that now we have free time. Not necessarily free time. We don't have to take him out of school to go to a therapy appointment. We don't have to have him miss days or have to work around the school schedule. If we need to do something Tuesday at 10 o'clock, we can do that, because I can just move the learning wherever we need it to be. So it allows for a different type of freedom, which I think I love anyway, because I've been working for myself for so many years that I couldn't work an office job. So having him home now just made sense to the dynamic that we had anyway.
Yeah. And you do a podcast as well.
Yeah, so that's paused a little bit just because of all the life that's been lifing. But yes, on the best of days, there's a podcast as well. But mainly just like making sure I'm pouring into my clients, into my business, into my family. Yeah.
What's it called?
It's called Life Beyond the Couch.
All right. So, how do you look back at it all?
Oh, as far as just life in general?
Yeah, I mean, you've overcome so many challenges, losing a mom, and I guess that void is never really going to go away. As you said, you still miss her during especially
sure.
Mother's Day. I guess you've evolved over the years. The
Mhm.
pain is now showing up in different ways. It's probably not as intense, but it's still there. We know that your first marriage didn't go as planned, but despite all the challenges, you are in a comfortable place with your ex-husband. You're co-parenting your daughter really well, and now you have this beautiful relationship, a husband and a new family in which you've integrated your daughters from your first marriage. So when you look back at it, I know that with all the ups and heavels and the ebbs and flows, but how has all this shaped you?
I think the biggest lesson that has come out of it has been grace. The person that you are talking to now has so much more ease in life than ever before. I used to hold myself to these ridiculous standards. And I know I still do a lot. This looks like a lot, but I was doing so much more. If you can even imagine that. I was burning the candle at both ends, right? So I think it has shaped me in learning that life is so precious, and to really prioritize what matters most, and to make sure that I am not so hard on myself, because I think losing a parent that young, I also was like, I have to accomplish so much, because what if I die young? And I want to die empty. I want to make sure that I get every gift out of me and do all these things. And I was pushing myself past my capacity. And so just making sure that I now take a step back and say, my life still has meaning and has value and can shape lives, even if I'm just the most amazing mom. Even if my practice fails tomorrow, like, where are the parts that matter? So I think that has really shaped me, and just that loss is a part of life, right? I think it also helps me to know and to teach others and to show up for others. I think a therapist who's never been through anything, they can empathize, being able to say, I've sat in the shoes of so many of my clients, and I'm able to really empathize in a way to say, I get it. I understand. And I'm not just going to say, okay, let's get through it. But sometimes you have to just sit with it, and you have to really figure out, how has this changed me? And what is this new normal? My life will never be the same after these different losses, but it doesn't mean that my life still can't be good. And I think knowing that and knowing how to navigate that is now just how I interact with the world. And I hope that it helps. And I hope that the people around me are better for it because of that mindset that I have.
Would you have done anything differently?
Oh, for sure. I think as we all have regrets and we all have things that we would, I think that there's so many different things. I think that in a perfect world, I would have never gotten divorced. I would have been able to figure it out so that my daughter could have, I would have figured out earlier how to mature. But that said, with now 10 years life experience, I think I did the best that I could with what I knew and what I had in those times. So if anything, I think the only thing that I would have changed very definitively was I would have gotten more serious about my walk with God earlier, and I would have let that drive my decisions and my motivations so much more, because I think that I just lost out on a lot of peace and a lot of clarity that I could have had, that I have now, that I could have had so much earlier in life.
So, what's next for you? It-
Yeah. So I have been, last year, I did this class about dating and dating intentionally, especially for those who identify as Christian. And so we're going to do a part 2 of that class. I'm hoping to just continue to advocate, not just for mental health, but even now being like a mom with neurodivergent kiddo, and just have safe spaces for that. I'm not quite sure exactly what it'll look like, but even just having those conversations. I did a podcast episode with some moms who have neurodivergent kids, and it was just so beautiful, even in the recording, of just being able to say, I get it. Sometimes it's hard, and it's like, I don't want to be an advocate. I'm just being able to give space for that. So I think that, and I think just showing up authentically in all the spaces that I'm invited to and blessed to be a part of, and just hoping that what I've been through and my faith can help to encourage other people.
what advice would you give to someone who is going through loss or grief?
Yeah, to not isolate, to find support and find community. Grief often lies to us and tell us we have to do it alone, and tells us that it's nobody else's burden and it's ours to shoulder. And so just allowing others to carry you sometimes. And it's hard for those people who maybe never learn to depend on other people, but it's so necessary. And so many of us rob ourselves of the experience of being taken care of. So to really find good community and to allow them to be there for you.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, that wraps up our episode. And I'd like to thank you once again, Rachel. This was so insightful. I think a lot of listeners, and especially people who are grieving or have gone through a loss, will learn a lot. I especially like your positive attitude, the joy that you bring in. I think it adds to your the positive mindset that you bring. I think these are all the nuggets that have shown up in this episode. The joy that you have and the positive attitude. Whatever has hit you, you've always taken it in your stride and said, okay, we'll do something about this.
Yeah.
We're going to take care of it. And it started showing up very young when your mom passed away. You've not let it affect you in a negative way, but you've given a new life to it. You've learned a new way of living out of it. And I really admire that. That thing really was so prominent in this episode.
Thank you.
So I'm so grateful for this conversation.
My pleasure.
If you found the content valuable, please like, share, and subscribe and spread the word. I feel the best compliment is being referred. That one action of yours can help us reach more people and fulfill the mission of thriving changes. Thank you for considering.